Let us pray. Your wisdom, O God, has taught us that our words come back to us laden with the fruits of its own speech. Under your authority, our word is the law unto our life, and the law unto everything that we speak. O word, go forth and heal and bless all of humanity. Tell them of their divine birthright. Tell the strangers that they are not alone, but that one goes with them who knows and who cares. Tell the sick that they are healed, and the poor that they cannot want. Tell the unhappy of the joy of the soul, and break the bonds of those who are in prison. Our word shall come back to us, blessed of God and people. Amen.
Amen.
And we're going to look at some words today in John 11 that guarantees you. How would you like a guarantee that every prayer you pray is answered?
That would be.
Sorry, say it
It
again.
already is.
They are.
Yeah. Say it again. I'm sorry.
Every prayer you pray is answered.
Yes.
Sometimes years later, I'm glad they didn't get answered.
Yeah.
Right. They got answered in the way they're supposed to be.
According to whom?
According to the all that there is has already set up everything for you.
Okay, just a word of a little change in our schedule. We're going to try to get through chapter 11 today. I'm going to hit the highlights of it because I want to talk about the effects of the resurrection of Jesus for the next 2 weeks, or final 2 weeks of teaching. So next week we will study John chapter 17. And the week following, I will tell you next week, because I know it will be John 16, but there'll be some other things also. So, and that's not according to the schedule. I had scheduled 2 weeks on the raising of Lazarus, and the saying is, you already know what the saying is saying, and you can get the sign easily enough. So we're going to take 1 week to cover this sign and mystical saying.
And it's John 17.
John 17 next week. And I'm going to give you a corrected text of John 17 at the end of this class, and you can use that along with your book. Okay, this is a fairly familiar story. We have Mary and Martha and Lazarus. They live in Bethany, which is about 5 miles away from Jerusalem. That is where Jesus resorted to the last week of his life. He every day would visit the temple and teach, and then he would leave the temple, go up the Mount of Olives and down the other side, and Bethany's on the other side of the Mount of Olives.
I have a question.
Sure.
What Mary is this? I'm confused. There's Mary Magdalene, there's one Mary, this is just another Mary?
Another Mary.
Okay.
Miriam was one of the most popular names for a girl at that time.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And Mary and Martha, of course, are mentioned in the Gospel of Luke. So that there are traditions of Mary and Martha that were spoken of orally, passed down. Luke captures some of it, John captures some of it. The raising of Lazarus, though, is not mentioned anywhere except in the Gospel of John. And there's a reason for that, we'll get to.
Thank you.
So Mary and Martha and Lazarus, unknown last name. They're disciples of Jesus. Metaphorically or metaphysically, they stand for all of us because they're at different levels of discipleship, as we'll see. Okay, we're on page 68. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair. And that happens later on in the chapter. But that was a cemented memory in the Christian community of the first ages. So the sisters, it was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. Okay, so let's go and read 2 verses at a time. Did you do that? Start at verse 3.
So the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, Lord, he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, this illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it.
Okay, the phrase Son of God, the words of God are not in the original gospel. So it reads, this illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son may be glorified through it. And remember, the signs are the glory of God. The very first sign, Jesus turned water into wine, and it says the disciples saw his glory. So glory means that it's to honor something. So what Jesus does honors his Father. Okay, verse 5 is not in the original. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. That's an explanatory comment that was inserted later on. So you can pick these up very easily. Okay, so start reading from verse 6.
So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer than the place where he was. Then after this he said to the disciples, let us go to Judea again.
Okay, so this verse makes it sound like, he heard that he's dead and he waits 2 days longer. The phrase, so when he heard that Lazarus was ill, is not in the original gospel. It goes, this illness does not lead to death, is for the glory of God, so the Son may be glorified through it. He stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. It's got nothing to do with Jesus knowing that he died or anything. It just says, what I'm going to do will glorify God. Okay, then, so he says, let's go to Judea again, and he's in Galilee right now. And you can tell from the past few weeks, the hostility that he faced in Judea was pretty fierce. So, let's keep going with verse 8 and 9.
His disciples said to him, Teacher, not long ago the Jews wanted to stone you, and yet are you going there again? Jesus said to them, Are there not 12 hours in the day? If a man walks by daytime, he will not stumble because he sees the light of this world.
Okay, but if anyone walks at night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. So this is applying a spiritual principle. The sun during the day and the night describe the state of spiritual death or spiritual life. Okay, let's go on to verse 11 and 12.
After saying these things, he said to them, Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him. The disciples said to him, Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover.
Okay, did you notice what Jesus calls Lazarus?
Asleep?
No, he calls him his friend.
Oh, sorry.
His friend. If you remember, 15 weeks ago, the very first sermon I preached to introduce this study was how to become a friend of God, or how to be a friend of God. So this identifies Lazarus as a very intimate disciple of Jesus, as were Martha and Mary. And this is the reason why Lazarus' death is the sign that will glorify God. Friend is used of Lazarus. In chapter 15, Jesus says, I no longer call you disciples, I call you my friends. And the last mention of friends, of course, is Pilate. If you don't crucify this man, you're no friend of Caesar. So it's that friendship designation from the Roman world that this gospel is addressing. So we know that Lazarus isn't just an unknown factor. He was an intimate disciple of Jesus. So I want to show you something else. In the third letter of John, the last two verses says, I had many things to write to you, but I am unwilling to write to you with ink and pen. Instead, I hope to see you soon, and we will speak face to face. Peace be to you. The friends where he was greet you, and greet the friends where you are by name. So this is where, of course, the Quakers got their official name, the Society of Friends. And that's a terrific name because it is very biblical that Jesus was a friend of God, and to become a friend of Jesus is also to become a friend of God. There's a relationship there. So the disciples, of course, don't understand. If he's fallen asleep, he'll recover. Now, Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he meant taking rest in sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus has died, and for your sake I'm glad I was not there so that you may believe. But let us go to him. So Thomas, called the twin is Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, let us go that we may die with him. Judea was a very dangerous place to be with Jesus. So this sign that we're about to study is the giving of physical life as a sign of the gift of spiritual life. And it should be balanced in your mind with the sign of healing the man born blind and restoring his sight. They convey the same message, that keeping Jesus' words is the key to living a divine life, divine Zoe. And because Lazarus was his friend, Lazarus was following what Jesus said. He was trying to do exactly what Jesus taught him. Okay? So the physical sign is certainly a miracle, but the far deeper message is Lazarus represents me. It means if I die, I can rest assured that my consciousness will not end. And even while we are alive, we have the divine consciousness within us. Okay? So let's start with verse 17, 18, and 19, if you would.
Okay. Now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother.
Okay, so the funeral is in full swing, which is a community event. There are a lot of people there. In fact, some of Jesus' opponents were undoubtedly in the crowd, because Martha, Mary, and Lazarus were known as disciples of Jesus, so that they were betting Jesus is going to show up. Okay. So let's go to, he's in the tomb 4 days. In ancient times, of course, people resuscitated. They had died, and then they start breathing again. That meant that they really had not died, or they had died and come back under their own power. We didn't have measurements of brain activity and all that. So the rabbinic rule was not to bury for 3 days, in case the person started breathing again. It was a safe rule. But 4 days, he's not coming back. Right? So this is a signal that this guy is dead. Like Charles Dickens wrote of Marley, he was dead as a doornail, right? Whether doornails are dead or not. But that's the signal to the Jewish audience that he's really dead. Okay? So who's next? Read verse 20 and 21.
So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died."
Okay. So Martha, we know from the Luke story, is the one who is busy in the kitchen, busy cleaning, and Mary was the one that listened to Jesus sit at his feet, and he wasn't going to take that away from Mary, right? So here comes Martha. Now, the word Lord there, Martha said to Jesus, Lord, is not in the original gospel. Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. She just, she's angry at him. So let's go on to 22 and 23.
But even now, I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again.
Okay. So, do you think that consoled her?
No.
Probably not until she sees him up and around.
Yeah, if someone said that to me when I saw my Nana dying, I probably would have.
Yeah. Doesn't this remind you of what Mary, his mother, says to the servants when he's turning water into wine? She says, do whatever he tells you to do. And Martha's saying the same thing. I know that you could do whatever you wanted to. Whatever you ask from God, God will give it to you. So he just simply says, your brother will rise again. I'm going to give him new life. But let's look at how Martha interprets his statement. Verse 24 and 25.
Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live.
And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? So, what Martha did, in response to your brother will rise again, she said, I know at the end of time the resurrection will happen and I'll see him. She quotes doctrine to Jesus. She does not see, she does not fully understand She is a disciple of Jesus, but she is an unformed disciple.
That's what a lot of people do these days. It feels like they just quote words and doctrine to each other. They don't live it, I guess, question mark.
And later, in just a few sentences, she's going to say, I believe that you are the prophet to come into the world. So she recognizes his position with God, but it has not soaked into her head
Take it, leap, yeah.
exactly what having the consciousness of God will allow a person to do. Doesn't get it, right? And Martha had to push away a lot of people to get to Jesus. She was angry, and if you had been here, he wouldn't have died. Jesus, your brother will rise again, and she just slips back into this rote thinking, the thinking of the system of the day. So, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, so belief entails knowing what the teacher teaches and practicing it. That is the trust that is required. Whoever believes in me, though he die, if he dies, yet shall he live. So the believer, if he dies physically, will live spiritually forever, because everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Now we know the physical body dies. So this is a spiritual state of being. If you are a disciple of Jesus, your spirit, your consciousness is in God. And it doesn't mean you're going to live a perfect life. Martha was a disciple of Jesus as well. Disciples come in all flavors and, on a range. Peter's one of the worst disciples of all for screwing up what Jesus meant. Peter. So, when you're thinking about the ideal, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute, give yourself a break, because we are all in different stages of discipleship.
She said to him, Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. When she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, The teacher is here and is calling for you.
Okay, so, do you believe this, he says. She said, Yes, Lord, and that is in the original. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world, which reminds us of the prophet that's coming into the world. We saw that on John 6:14 on page 34. When the people saw the sign that he had done, the feeding of the 5,000, they said, This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world. So the Christ, the anointed one, and the prophet are equivalent. So then she leaves, she tells Mary. Now Mary's in a different state of discipleship. So let's read 29 and 30.
And when she heard this, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him.
Yeah, that's the Greek would indicate that it was either so many mourners that Jesus could not get through the crowd, or it was his opponents who were preventing him from going to Martha and Mary. It's the Greek could read either way. Either it was a hostile situation or just a crowded situation. Okay, let's go to the next two.
But the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out. They followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there.
Okay, the word supposing is actually the word saying. So they said that to themselves. So Mary responds and goes to Jesus. Okay, let's read 32 and 33 next.
Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died.
And 33.
When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled.
Okay, Mary is a fully formed disciple. Notice how she doesn't just walk up to Jesus and say, if you'd been here, what does she do? She fell at his feet. Now, the closest modern example of what she did is found in the Muslim faith when they pray. It's not only falling on your knees, it's falling forward with your head on the ground. That is the posture of worship. Whenever it says someone worshiped Jesus, that's what they were doing. Sort of like kowtowing in the Chinese culture, except you're not knocking your head on the ground. It is a symbol of abject humility before divinity. I remember once I had established a parish many years ago, and we were looking for a building, and we finally rented part of an education building from another church. And when we first moved in there, the pastor said, well, you should do a service on Sunday morning for us so we get to know you. And I said, well, it's an Anglican service. He said, oh, that's fine. So I had pews, beautiful big sanctuary. Had 20 people in it normally, but and we, more than doubled the size of it. So there's a particular part of the service, I never will forget this. I was singing a prayer, and all of the people in our parish attending knelt on their knees because that was a prayer. And none of the other people did, right? It was a very weird situation, except there was one ex-Episcopalian that was a member of that church, and he got down on his knees too. Because that's the position of a humble servant of God. And the pastor, and I'm singing, but I have the words memorized, I'm singing along. The pastor got up and went to that man in a loud voice, said, you don't have to kneel, get up.
Oh my God. Hello.
And the man looked at him and ignored him and remained kneeling. I never will forget that. Why is a posture of humility so bad in the modern world, or so horrible to, and it was the United Church of Christ, very liberal Protestant church. And I've always wondered what's wrong with using your body to express worship, because we are human, right? And Mary is expressing her love and devotion and humility before the Lord, but she asks him the same thing, or she tells him the same thing. If you had been here, my brother would not have died. And that breaks Christ emotionally. Just my fully formed disciple, whom I love with all my heart, has this to say about me. He wept. It's a very, very touching scene.
That gives such new meaning to the phrase, Jesus wept. I always thought because he was upset that Lazarus died.
No, he's upset
Yeah.
because, Mary must have been one of his foremost disciples, and she does not understand that he gives spiritual life. That's what broke him, yeah.
Okay, and it says that he was greatly troubled, and I've never heard it explained like you explained it, but when Jesus wept, I can understand him weeping, emotion, he's broke.
Yeah.
But he also wept because, what have I got to do for y'all to believe what I say?
No,
Okay,
no.
I kind of think that though.
The Greek indicates he was moved to the bottom of his heart. I mean, what she did there, just,
Yeah, I got it.
someone that you were close to that says something that just you have no response to because you're so deeply moved.
To me, I feel like if someone had said that to me, I would feel like I'd let them down or something. I don't know if maybe that's
You're
what's
Jesus.
Yeah,
You're Jesus.
going on.
I
No,
bet-
in that situation. I
yeah.
mean, like if someone
That's the natural
That's
human
the natural.
human way of looking at it. Jesus had God's consciousness. And he's going to raise Lazarus to the glory of God. But he is touched by a very close disciple who is following him, who is still so tied to earthly concepts.
So moved in his spirit and greatly troubled are the same.
Yeah. There are some people who translate troubled as angry.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
He was greatly troubled.
But he wasn't angry because what do I have to do to prove? That's human interpretation. If there was any anger, it was anger at death itself. That death exists.
Okay.
But I don't believe that the Greek requires that. I think it's an entire reaction to what Mary said. So then when he can speak again in verse 34, where have you laid him? And they said to him, Lord, come and see. Now this should provide, if you remember, the very first chapters of John, the disciples go up to Jesus, the future disciples, and they say, where are you staying? And he said, come and see. That was leading them to life, and now come and see this dead person. Good contrast there. Jesus wept. So the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man, that's from chapter 9, also have kept this man from dying? So, this is the typical human reaction. I'm going to stand back. Let's see, he did that. Why couldn't he have done that? And
shoulda, coulda, woulda.
yeah. Okay, so Al, would you read verse 38 and 39 for us?
Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he hath been dead 4 days.
Okay, so we've got the 4 days. The phrase, the sister of the dead man, is not in the original. It's an explanatory interpolation in addition to the text.
Let me ask you, who's making these additions?
Christian scribes later on trying to fill in little gaps to explain things, like Martha, the sister of the dead man. In other words, they want you to get the relationship there. They didn't do it in an evil way. They're trying to help explain what the text is saying. Part of the problem, though, is sometimes they get it wrong, you know. But it didn't have any evil intent.
No, when you say it's the Gospel of John, then I think John is, in the account, should be talking directly to the reader of the text.
Yeah.
You know, and then when I hear something interjected,
Yeah.
I know it's not a normal.
And if you pay enough attention to the Gospels, if that becomes the food of your soul, you will recognize those things instantly. It does not take a genius, and with online resources you can look up, it'll tell you. Okay, so let's see, where are we? Okay, 40. So would you start with 40 and 41?
Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?"
Okay, so that refers back to when he first talked to her.
So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me."
Okay. How many times have you started a prayer saying, "Father, I thank you because I know you always hear me"? I would suggest that become the affirmation of your life. I thank you because you always hear my words. And that is the secret to having your prayers answered. Not because what comes out of your mouth next is going to happen, but you've got to be just the way Jesus was. What does Jesus tell us was his mission in life?
To do the will of the Father.
To do the will of the Father. What is our mission? That the kingdom come and his will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We have the same mission. So, for example, I don't know if any of you can remember when I baptized Indy a year and a half ago. Just before I baptized him, I said, "Abba God, I know that you always hear me." And I baptized him. Because I know that it's the will of God for new disciples to come into existence. Jesus specifically said, "Let the little children come to me and forbid them not." Is it the will? And you can just, before you pray anything, ask, is this the will of God? And your own consciousness will tell you. And if your consciousness tells you, yes, that's the will of God, of course it is, then pray, "Father, I know you always hear what I say." And you can pray anything into existence if it is the will of God. But you have to learn what the will is. And how do you learn what the will of God is?
Listening.
Following Jesus' teachings.
Following his teachings, that's right. You've got to be soaked in them. I'm going to preach a sermon at the end of May about this topic. Is it the will of God that Jesus' words are always preached on at Sunday services? I would say yes.
Well, I hope.
And I've always done that. Always. So this is how you can measure anything in your life. Is it the will of God? Is this the will of God? And the times that you prayed for something that didn't happen, guess what?
It wasn't the will of God.
That's right. But here you've got the backup for that insight. You know it because the Son of God said it.
Yeah.
That is one of my favorite verses in the Bible.
Father, I thank you that you have heard me.
That's right. That's it. The next verse has a disputed origin. Some manuscripts have it, some do not. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me, is not in half the manuscripts. And it sounds explanatory to me. I think the original said, Father, I thank you that you hear me, not have heard. You hear me. Lazarus, come out. It came immediately after that. He knew it was the will of God for Lazarus to rise. Right? Because Lazarus is the sign of a disciple's new life that continues after death. Okay.
His hand and feet.
Page 30.
That's why we have Easter. Bunny rabbit. We figured it out.
Okay, so let's turn to page 30. Page 30, we're in John 5, verse 30. Jesus is talking. I can do nothing on my own. As I hear, in his inner consciousness, I judge, and my judgment is just, because I seek not my own will, but the will of him who sent me. It's just as plain as day. Look at verse 25. Truly, truly, I say to you, an hour is coming, and now is here, when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. So Lazarus is all of us, right? For as the Father has life in himself, he has also granted the Son to have life in himself. Okay, so John's gospel is very consistent in delivering one message, and that is pay attention, live, practice the teachings of Jesus. They reveal the will of God, and if you adopt his teachings, that's what your life becomes devoted to. Okay, so then he comes out of the tomb. Excuse me. So I'm sure we're late, aren't we? What time is it?
It's 20 past.
Okay, we'll cover one more thing. So the Pharisees hear about this, and they were there probably to witness it as well. Let's turn to page 74. And look at verse 47. So the chief priests and Pharisees gathered the council and said, "What are we to do? For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation." That was the motivation for the death. Then it quotes Caiaphas and all this. So Jesus, in verse 54, Jesus no longer walked openly among the Jews. He had to go into hiding every night. He was protected during the day by his followers. That's why the arrest in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he only had 12 with him. And I want you to see one more thing. John 12, page 76. This is after Mary anoints Jesus with oil and perfume. Verse 9. When the large crowd of the Jews learned that Jesus was there, they came, not only on account of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. Let's go see that guy. So the chief priests made plans to put Lazarus to death as well, because on account of him, many of the Jews were going away and believing in Jesus.
Did they kill Lazarus?
I think they did. In fact, I'm sad to say I think they murdered both Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. Because if they remove the closest members of the family, they can just claim that the others looking on were just fooled or were spreading lies. They got Jesus, so there's no reason to believe that they didn't get Lazarus as well. Which is one reason why it's not in the Synoptic Gospels. They weren't there to give their testimony.
Makes sense.
And most of the action in the Synoptics takes place in Galilee and has just the last week of Jesus' life in Jerusalem. John talks a lot about what happens in Judea and Jerusalem. But do you understand that metaphysically Lazarus, Mary, and Martha all represent us in our varying levels of understanding, our varying levels of commitment, how much we've broken away from the religious system, which is seeking to control people in large numbers. And Jesus, his teachings clearly provide a way out of that system.